My name is Clara. I'm 29. For the better part of 5 years, I've kept a deliberate distance from my dad's side of the family. It wasn't because of one single blow-up, but a slow, painful erosion from years of quiet rejection, with my Aunt Helen leading the charge. So when my dad's text popped up on my phone inviting me to Christmas dinner this year, a tiny, foolish part of me thought things might finally be different. I poured hours into choosing gifts that were more thoughtful than my budget allowed, drove 40 miles as a light snow began to fall, and walked up to that familiar front door with a fragile hope blooming in my chest. But when Aunt Helen opened that door, took one look at me, and rolled her eyes before saying those words, that hope shattered. If you've ever felt the sharp, cold sting of being rejected by your own family during what's supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And please hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to navigate holiday family drama, because this Christmas story is about to take a turn no one saw coming. My earliest Christmas memories are bathed in a warm, golden light. I can still feel the scratchy wool of my grandfather George's sweater as I sat on his lap, his deep voice rumbling through my back as he read The Night Before Christmas. My cousins, Megan and Kevin, would bicker playfully over whose turn it was to place the angel on top of the towering tree, while the whole house smelled of cinnamon and ginger from my grandmother Margaret's cookies. In those moments, I belonged, but everything fractured when I turned 12. My parents' marriage imploded after my mother, Sarah, found out my father, Robert, was having an affair with a woman from his office named Diane. The divorce wasn't just messy, it was a demolition, leaving my mom struggling to keep us afloat while my dad moved into a sprawling new house with Diane just 3 months later. They were married before the ink was even dry on the divorce papers. Aunt Helen, my father's older sister, immediately circled the wagons around him. According to my mom, she'd always been that way, defending my dad's worst impulses since they were kids. Your Aunt Helen thinks the sun rises and sets with your father, Mom would tell me with a weary sigh. While my mom worked double shifts as a nurse to afford our small apartment, my dad's new life with his new family seemed to be thriving. Diane came from a wealthy family, and their house in the exclusive suburb of Oak Ridge became the new gravitational center for all family holidays. At first, I was still included, but it was always as an awkward add-on, a leftover piece that didn't quite fit the new puzzle. At one Thanksgiving when I was 14, Aunt Helen asked me, loud enough for half the room to hear, "Do you need some money for a proper dress, dear?" Diane always likes the table to look nice. I was wearing a new dress I had saved up for, and the implication hung in the air. I was dragging the picture down. As I got older, the invitations dwindled. "We thought you'd be busy with your mother," or "We just assumed you already had plans," became the standard refrains. By the time I was in college, studying to be an interior designer on a scholarship I'd worked my tail off for, I was effectively persona non grata at family functions, even though no one ever said so directly. The last Christmas I went to was 5 years ago. I was 24, fresh out of college, and had just landed my first job at a small design firm. I brought gifts I couldn't really afford and spent 3 hours fielding thinly veiled criticisms about my unstable career choice, especially compared to my cousin Megan, who was already in medical school. That night, I overheard Aunt Helen in the kitchen talking to my stepmother, Diane. "I don't know why Robert feels the need to invite her every year," she'd said. "Sarah has poisoned her against us anyway." Diane had murmured something indistinct in reply, but what struck me was that neither of them defended me. That was the last invitation I accepted. My father's contact became limited to brief, superficial texts on my birthday and major holidays. "How's work?" he'd ask, though he never seemed to remember the name of my firm or any of the projects I was so proud of. So when his text appeared on my phone 3 weeks before Christmas this year, it caught me completely off guard. "Clara, Christmas dinner at the house this year, 3 p.m. Your grandmother has been asking about you. Would be nice if you could make it." I stared at that message for a solid 10 minutes. When I called my mom to ask for her advice, she was predictably cautious. "Honey, you know I'll support whatever you decide," she said, her voice gentle, "but please guard your heart." They haven't exactly rolled out the welcome mat in the past. Grandma Margaret is getting older, I reasoned, more to myself than to her. Maybe this is a chance to reconnect before it's too late. "Just remember," Mom said softly, "you have people who love you for exactly who you are. You don't need to beg for a seat at a table where you have to prove your worth." Despite her warning, I texted back a simple, "I'd love to. See you then." A part of me needed to believe this time could be different. I spent the next 2 weeks on a mission, channeling my hope into finding the perfect gifts. On my tight budget, it was a challenge, but I was determined. For my grandmother, I found a beautiful vintage brooch that looked just like one she'd lost years ago. For my dad, a handsome leather-bound journal with his initials embossed on the cover, since I knew he still preferred jotting down notes by hand. I even bought presents for Aunt Helen and Diane, choosing a soft, elegant pashmina for my aunt and a new cookbook on Northern Italian cuisine for my stepmother, who'd once mentioned wanting to learn. I wrapped each gift with the precision of a designer, using techniques my mom taught me, believing that the care you put into the presentation showed the depth of your feeling. I wrote heartfelt cards for each one, expressing a desire for a fresh start without dredging up old grievances. Maybe it was naive, but as Christmas approached, I let myself believe that this invitation was an olive branch, a sign that they were finally ready to let me back in. Christmas morning arrived, crisp and bright. I was up before the sun, too jittery to sleep. I must have stood in front of my closet for 30 minutes, trying on 3 different outfits before finally settling on a deep forest green sweater dress. My best friend Chloe had once said it brought out the gold flecks in my eyes. It felt festive but professional, celebratory but not desperate. I applied my makeup with a light hand, aiming for a natural look that wouldn't give Aunt Helen any ammunition for her usual critiques about trying too hard. I twisted my hair into a simple updo, securing it with a pearl hairpin that had belonged to my mom's mother. The beautifully wrapped presents sat on my small dining table, a colorful testament to my hope for reconciliation. I grabbed a bottle of good red wine as a hostess gift, one that was respectable, but not so expensive it would look like I was showing off. As I was about to leave, my phone buzzed. It was Chloe, calling for a Christmas pep talk. "Remember who you are," she said firmly. "You are a kind, intelligent, successful woman who has built an amazing life for herself. You don't need their approval." "I know," I sighed, my voice wavering slightly. "I just wish it didn't matter so much." "It matters because you have a good heart, Clara," she said gently, "but promise me you'll text if it gets weird." My parents live 10 minutes from Oak Ridge. I can stage a fake emergency and come rescue you. "Thanks, Chloe. I'll be fine," I said, trying to convince myself more than her. The drive to my father's house took nearly an hour. As the city skyline shrank in my rearview mirror, the buildings gave way to sprawling lawns and stately homes. The sky, clear when I left, had begun to fill with soft gray clouds, and by the time I reached Oak Ridge, a delicate snow had started to fall, dusting the professionally decorated houses with a fine white powder. Each mile closer brought a fresh wave of memories. I passed the little ice cream parlor my dad used to take me to after my soccer games, back when we were a wee. I saw the park where we'd had a family picnic once, all of us, Mom included, laughing as my cousin Kevin chased squirrels. It felt like another lifetime. I arrived 20 minutes early, my anxiety making me misjudge the traffic. Instead of pulling into the driveway, I parked down the street, sitting in my car for a few minutes to gather my courage. The house was just as I remembered it, a grand Tudor-style home, every eave and window outlined in warm, professionally installed Christmas lights. A massive wreath adorned the front door, and through the big bay window, I could see a colossal Christmas tree glittering with what looked like thousands of tiny white lights and silver's ornaments. The driveway was already full of luxury cars. A black Mercedes SUV I guessed was my uncle's. A sleek new BMW that was probably Megan's. My 10-year-old Honda Civic would have looked like a stray, which is partly why I'd parked on the street. Taking a few deep, fortifying breaths, I gathered the presents from my passenger seat and made my way up the stone walkway. The sound of joyful laughter and the rich scent of roasting turkey drifted from the house. For one fleeting moment, standing there with snowflakes melting on my coat, I felt a surge of pure hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the Christmas where I finally came home. I shifted the packages in my arms and pressed the doorbell, hearing the familiar chimes echo inside. The laughter inside continued, unbroken. I waited, the chill starting to seep through my coat. Just as I was about to ring it again, the door swung open. Aunt Helen stood there, her tall, imposing frame blocking the entryway. She was wearing an expensive-looking silk dress, a familiar gold necklace, a family heirloom at her throat. For a split second, I saw surprise on her face. Then it hardened, her eyes flicking from my face down to the gifts in my arms and back up again. "Clara," she said, and my name sounded like an indictment. She didn't move to let me in. "Merry Christmas, Aunt Helen," I said, my voice impressively steady. "Dad invited me to dinner." She glanced over her shoulder, then her eyes, cold and sharp, met mine. She rolled them in a theatrical, dismissive arc. "We don't want you here," she said, her voice a low, cold blade. "Go ruin someone else's holiday." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. As she shifted, I caught a glimpse past her into the dining room. The whole family was there, already seated around the long, polished table. Plates were full, wine glasses were raised in a toast. My grandmother at one end, my father at the other, my cousins and their partners filling in the sides. They were all laughing, not a single one of them looking toward the door. I saw my father, his head thrown back in a hearty laugh at something my uncle had just said. He didn't look up. He didn't hear, or he chose not to. The result was the same, a deafening silence where his defense of me should have been. The presents in my arms suddenly felt like they weighed 100 pounds. I swallowed hard against the lump forming in my throat, blinking back the hot tears that were threatening to spill. "Got it," I whispered, my voice so quiet I could barely hear it myself over the festive sounds from inside. I turned around and walked back down the path, the snow falling more heavily now, clinging to my eyelashes and melting into the tears I refused to let fall. The sanctuary of my car felt a world away. I tossed the gifts onto the passenger seat and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Only then did I let the first sob escape, a raw, ragged sound that filled the small space. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. "How's it going? Family being nice?" My hands were trembling as I typed back. They didn't let me in. Aunt Helen told me to go ruin someone else's holiday. They were already eating dinner. Dad saw, but did nothing. The 3 dots appeared instantly, followed by a string of furious messages. "What? I'm coming to get you. Where are you?" "In my car outside the house. Don't come. I just need a minute." As I sat there, paralyzed by a fresh wave of old hurts, more memories flooded in. The time my invitation to Megan's high school graduation party mysteriously got lost in the mail. The family vacation photos Kevin had accidentally tagged me in on social media. A trip to the beach I'd known nothing about. The way my dad had conveniently forgotten to mention he was walking Megan down the aisle at her wedding until I asked why his suit needed pressing that weekend. Each individual slight had seemed small enough to explain away, but together they formed a mosaic of exclusion I had deliberately refused to see. I started the car, an urgent need to be anywhere but there propelling me. As I pulled away from the curb, I saw my father's neighbor, a woman named Catherine, peering at me from her window, her expression curious. Perfect. Now the whole neighborhood would have fresh gossip about Robert's rejected daughter. I drove aimlessly for what felt like an eternity. the Christmas lights on other people's houses blurring through my tears. I ended up at Lakeside Park, a public space that was mostly deserted on Christmas Day. I parked facing the partially frozen lake and finally called my mother. "Sweetheart, how's dinner going?" she asked, her voice cheerful over the background noise of the hospital where she was working a holiday shift. "It's not," I choked out, my voice finally breaking. Aunt Helen turned me away at the door. They were already eating. Dad didn't even get up. The string of creative and colorful curses that followed from my normally gentle mother was almost shocking, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. "I am calling your father right now," she declared, her voice steel. "No, Mom, please don't," I begged. "It will only make things worse." "I don't want to ruin your Christmas, too." "You are not ruining anything," she insisted. "They are the ones behaving like monsters." After a few more minutes, I managed to talk her down. "I'll be okay," I promised. "I'm going to figure something out." As we were talking, I remembered a flyer I'd seen tacked to the bulletin board at my local coffee shop. The Brookside Community Hall was hosting a Christmas meal for anyone who had nowhere else to go. I'd briefly considered volunteering before my dad's invitation arrived. "Mom," I said, a new idea beginning to cut through the fog of my pain. "I think I know what I'm going to do with all these gifts." "What's that, honey?" "The community hall downtown is serving dinner to people who need it. I bet they could use these as donations. Maybe door prizes or something." "That sounds like a wonderful idea, Clara," my mother said, and the pride in her voice was a balm to my wounded heart. "That's my girl. That's who you are." After we hung up, I plugged the community hall's address into my GPS. It was 15 minutes away in a part of the city my father's family would never dream of visiting. The hall was in an old, repurposed church, its red brick walls decorated with simple, cheerful strings of colored lights. As I walked toward the entrance, juggling my armful of beautifully wrapped presents, a woman with a cascade of gray curls and a bright red sweater held the door open for me. "Looks like Santa's running a little behind," she joked warmly. "I'm Brenda, the volunteer coordinator." "Are those donations?" "Yes," I said, managing a small smile. "I thought they might bring someone a little joy today." "You have no idea," Brenda said, her eyes shining as she led me into a large, bustling hall. Long tables were set up in rows, and about 50 people of all ages were already there, being served plates of turkey and mashed potatoes by a team of volunteers. We always try to have a small gift for every guest, but our donations came up short this year. This is a Christmas miracle. As I helped her arrange the gifts on a table near the tree, Brenda asked if I'd like to stay for dinner. "Actually," I said, surprising myself, "would it be okay if I helped serve? I don't really have anywhere else to be." "We would love the help," she beamed, handing me an apron with little snowmen printed on it. For the next hour, I lost myself in the work. I refilled water glasses, served slices of pumpkin pie, and listened. I met Walter, an 82-year-old veteran whose wife had passed away a few years ago. I talked to a young mother named Lily with 2 small kids who had just fled an abusive partner and was spending her first Christmas in a new city. There were college students who couldn't afford the flight home, elderly folks with no family left, and people whose life circumstances had led them all to this same warm room on this cold day. As I refilled Walter's coffee, he looked up at me with kind, knowing eyes. "Not where you planned on spending Christmas, is it, young lady?" I just shook my head, not trusting my voice. I gave him the short, painful version of my afternoon. "Well," he said, patting my hand, "family is the people you're born to, but it's also the people you choose. And it looks to me like you're making some pretty good choices right now." His words soothed something deep inside me that had felt frozen solid since Aunt Helen shut that door. In that moment, I realized I'd found more genuine human connection in this room of strangers than I'd felt with my father's family in over a decade. I was in the middle of serving apple pie when a commotion at the entrance made everyone turn. The double doors burst open, letting in a swirl of snow and frigid air, and there, looking completely and utterly out of place in his expensive camel hair coat, stood my father. "Clara!" he shouted, his eyes scanning the room frantically until they locked on me. "Clara, thank God!" The entire hall went silent. 100 eyes swiveled from me, standing there with a pie server in my hand, to the well-dressed man who had just stormed in like a tempest. I was frozen watching him stride towards me, his face flushed. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Brenda materialized at my side, her stance instantly protective. "Sir, is there a problem? This is a private event." My father looked from her to me for a moment, looking utterly lost. "I need to talk to my daughter," he finally managed. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated, a sudden hot anger surging past the shock. I carefully set down the pie server and untied my apron. "Brenda, could we use that little office for a minute?" I asked. She nodded, her expression full of concern. "Yell if you need anything," she said, giving my father a look that made it clear she meant it. I led my father into a small, cluttered office and closed the door, leaving it slightly ajar. I crossed my arms, waiting. "Clara, what Helen did?" "It was completely out of line," he began, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "None of us knew she was going to do that. We just thought you decided not to come." "You invited me, Dad. I texted you back. I was there on time with presents," I said, my voice cold and even. I know, he said, looking genuinely tormented. "Helen told everyone you'd called and canceled. She said you were spending the day with your mother. We were all disappointed, but we believed her." "And you just accepted that? You couldn't send a single text to check?" I challenged. He had the grace to look ashamed. "I should have." "You're right. I'm so sorry." "How did you even find me?" After we started eating, Megan kept asking why you canceled. Something about Helen's story wasn't sitting right with her. When she pressed, Helen got defensive. He let out a heavy sigh. Then Catherine, from next door, she called. She saw the whole thing from her window, Helen turning you away. She called Diane to ask if everything was okay because she saw you leave so upset. I closed my eyes, so it took a neighbor's gossip to get his attention. "So you knew I was there at your door and you did nothing?" "No, Clara, I swear I didn't hear the doorbell. We were all talking, the music was on. Helen volunteered to get the door. When she came back, she just said it was carolers." "And when you found out the truth?" My voice rose. "That's why I'm here." The second Diane got off the phone with Catherine, it was chaos. Megan started screaming at Helen. "Your grandmother got incredibly upset. I tried calling you, but you didn't answer." I glanced at my phone. 3 missed calls. I must have silenced it after texting Chloe. "We've been driving all over looking for you for the past hour," he continued, his voice desperate. "Megan and Kevin are checking other places. I suddenly remembered you mentioning this community center once." I studied his face, searching for the usual excuses, but all I saw was raw distress. "Even if that's true," I said slowly, "it doesn't change anything. It doesn't erase years of being made to feel like an unwanted afterthought. Today was just the first time someone was honest about it." "That's not fair," he protested weakly. "We always invited you." "Did you?" "Because my invitation stopped years ago. The few times I was there, I was treated like a pariah." "That was Helen," he admitted, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "We're just finding this out now. She's been intercepting things, telling us you declined, telling you events were rescheduled. But that doesn't excuse me, Clara. I should have tried harder. I should have protected you." The confession was dizzying. All those years of hurt I'd internalized as my own fault, my own unlovability. It had been an active campaign of sabotage by one person. "But why?" I whispered. "Why would she do that?" "Jealousy, I think," my father said, looking ancient and tired. "She never had children. And she and Diane are incredibly close. I I think she saw you as a threat to the new family I'd built." "That's insane," I breathed. "It is," he agreed, "and there's no excuse. Please, Clara, come back to the house. Everyone wants to see you. Your grandmother is beside herself. Christmas is ruined anyway. Helen's gone." I asked her to leave. I shook my head slowly. "I can't. I told these people I'd help." My father looked around the small office, then glanced through the open door at the people in the hall, as if truly seeing them for the first time. "Then let me help too," he said, stunning me. "And after, please just consider coming back. Let us try to make this right." Before I could answer, Brenda knocked and poked her head in. "Everything all right in here?" "Yes," I said, making a split-second decision. "Brenda, this is my father, Robert. He'd like to volunteer if you have an extra apron." Brenda raised a skeptical eyebrow but nodded. "We can always use the help." As she led my father away, I saw Walter watching me from his table, a small, knowing smile on his face. I walked over. "Family," he said simply. "How could you tell?" I replied, a small, watery laugh escaping me. "Been on this earth long enough to recognize the signs," he said. "The question is, what are you going to do now?" I looked over at my father, who was awkwardly trying to tie an apron over his expensive coat. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "Part of me wants to forgive them, and part of me wants to run and never look back." Walter nodded. "Both are valid. Just remember, forgiveness isn't about saying what they did was okay. It's about not letting it have power over your future anymore." My phone buzzed. It was Chloe. "Where are you? Are you okay?" I quickly typed out the unbelievable turn of events. Her reply was instant. "On my way. You are not facing this next chapter alone." As I went back to serving dessert, I watched my father from across the room. He was clumsy at first, but he was trying. He was actually talking to people, asking their names, listening with an interest that seemed genuine. It was a version of him I'd never seen before. 10 minutes later, Chloe burst in, a whirlwind of red coat and righteous indignation. She hugged me tight, then held me at arm's length. "Are you okay?" "Getting there," I said. I introduced her to Brenda and Walter, deliberately saving my father for last. When they shook hands, Chloe's expression was icy. "So, you're the famous Robert," she said, her tone making it very clear it was not a compliment. My father looked deeply uncomfortable. "I imagine you've heard a lot of things," he mumbled. "Not much of it good, no," Chloe confirmed. She turned back to me. "What's the plan, Clara?" "I'm with you, whatever you decide." "I'm going to finish helping here," I said, my voice stronger now. "And then, I think I need to go back to the house. If only for Grandma. She deserves to know the truth from me." Chloe nodded. "Then I'm coming with you." As we got back to work, my phone lit up with messages from Megan and Kevin, both expressing horror and begging me to come back to the house. I replied that I would be there later. For the next hour, we worked side by side, my chosen family and my biological father, serving a Christmas meal to this unexpected community. And for the first time all day, a strange sense of peace began to settle over me. The community meal was wrapping up around 3:30 p.m. when my father's phone rang. I saw his face go pale as he listened. "It's Diane," he said, his voice strained. "Your grandmother, she's not well." "The paramedics are on their way." My heart plummeted. What happened? The argument kept going after I left. Helen came back. She said some awful things. It upset Grandma terribly. Diane says her blood pressure is through the roof and she's having chest pains. Without a second thought, I turned to Brenda. "I'm so sorry, I have to go. It's a medical emergency." "Go, of course, go," Brenda said, shooing me away. "Family first." Chloe grabbed our coats. "I'm driving," she stated. "You're both in no state to be behind the wheel." The 15-minute drive to Oak Ridge felt like an hour. My dad kept trying to call Diane for an update, but no one was answering. I sat in the back, a knot of pure dread tightening in my stomach as Chloe expertly navigated the snowy streets. She's had heart trouble before, my dad explained, his voice tight with fear. The doctor warned her to avoid stress. When we turned onto his street, the flashing lights of an ambulance painted the houses in strobing red and blue. We screeched to a halt behind Megan's car and ran inside. The front door was wide open. My grandmother was lying on the living room sofa, pale and frail, an oxygen mask over her face. Megan, who was now a medical resident, was there, speaking in low, calm tones to one of the EMTs. "Grandma," I gasped, rushing to her side. Her eyes fluttered open and she reached out a trembling hand. I took it, shocked by how fragile it felt. "Clara," she whispered through the mask, "you came back." "Of course I came back," I said, tears finally streaming down my face. Megan put a hand on my shoulder. Her blood pressure was dangerously high, but it's coming down. They don't think it's a full-blown heart attack, but they want to take her to the hospital for observation. "What happened after I left?" I asked, looking around the disheveled room. Diane stood near the fireplace, her makeup smudged. Kevin looked distraught. "Helen came back," Kevin said, his voice heavy with disgust. "She started screaming that Dad had chosen you over her, over the family. Grandma told her to be quiet, and Helen, she lost it. She said you and your mother were leeches, that you'd wanted to ruin this family for years." "We found out she's been intercepting everything," Megan added, her face grim. "For years, Clara. Invitations, cards, even gifts. She told us you wanted nothing to do with us, and we were fools enough to believe her. She just admitted it." "But why?" I asked again, the motive still seeming so out of proportion with the crime. "She said she was protecting the family," Kevin scoffed. "Protecting her position is more like it. She was terrified you'd remind Dad and Diane of the past and threaten her place as the family matriarch." Just then, the front door opened again. It was Aunt Helen. She stopped dead when she saw me holding my grandmother's hand. "What is she doing here?" she demanded. The room fell utterly silent. "I invited her, Helen," my father said, his voice like flint. "She is my daughter. She is family. After everything I have done for this family, you choose her?" Helen shrieked. "The daughter of the woman who tried to ruin your life?" "My mother never tried to ruin anyone's life," I shot back, stepping forward. "She picked up the pieces of hers after you all shattered it. She worked 2 jobs to raise me while you lived in this palace. She never said a bad word about any of you, even when I came home sobbing because I'd been left out of yet another family event." "That's a lie," she hissed. "You were never part of this family." "No," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "You made sure of that. You lied and you manipulated everyone because you couldn't stand the thought of sharing the spotlight. That is enough." A weak but firm voice cut through the tension. It was my grandmother. All eyes turned to her. She pulled the oxygen mask from her face. "What I need," she said, her voice gaining strength, "is for my family to be whole. What you have done, Helen, is unforgivable. You've stolen years from me, years with my granddaughter. You planted poison where there should have been love." "I was protecting Helen cried. "No," Grandma said, her gaze sharp. "You were protecting yourself. That is not love. That is control." She looked at my father. "And you, Robert, you failed your daughter. You chose the easy path instead of the right one." My father simply nodded, accepting the judgment. "And Helen," my grandmother continued, "until you can truly understand the harm you have caused and seek to repair it, you are not welcome at our family gatherings." A collective gasp filled the room. "You can't be serious," Helen whispered. "I have never been more serious in my life," Grandma replied. She turned her eyes to me. "Now, I believe these nice young men need to take me to the hospital. Clara, will you ride with me?" "Of course, Grandma," I said instantly. As the paramedics wheeled her out, Aunt Helen stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out the door. Moments later, we heard the sound of her car speeding away. As I followed the stretcher to the ambulance, with Chloe at my side and my father and cousins trailing behind, I felt a strange sense of liberation. A weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. The hours at the hospital were a blur of fluorescent lights and hushed, difficult conversations. Grandma's condition stabilized, and by 7 p.m. she was insisting we all go home. "It's still Christmas," she said. "Don't let it be completely ruined." My uncle stayed with her, and the rest of us, my father, Megan, Kevin, and I, with Chloe as my silent, solid support, drove back to the house. When we walked in, Diane had performed a small miracle. The dining room was tidied, the table reset, and the food reheated. "I thought we could try again," she said, her voice hesitant. It seemed important. It was the kindest, most genuine thing she had ever said to me. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. The dinner that followed was surreal. Without Helen's oppressive presence, the air was different. Conversations that had been impossible for years began to surface. "We have presents for you," Megan said, looking embarrassed. "We always got you something. Helen just told us you didn't want to exchange gifts." She led me to the tree where a small pile of beautifully wrapped gifts had my name on them. A lump formed in my throat. "I had gifts for all of you too," I said softly, "but I donated them to the community hall." "That was a beautiful thing to do," Diane said, surprising me again. "Maybe we could pack up some of these leftovers and take them over tomorrow." My father, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "Clara, can we talk?" We went into his study. He closed the door and faced me, his eyes red. "I have failed you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just today, but for 15 years. I let my own guilt and my desire for an easy life with Diane blind me to my first responsibility, which was you." "Dad," I started. "No, please," he said. "I have no excuses." It was easier to believe you were angry and distant than to face my own cowardice. "I never fought for you, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that." His voice broke, and I found myself in the bizarre position of comforting the man whose absence had defined so much of my life. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said, composing himself. "Just a chance, if you're willing." I thought of Walter's words, creating space for a different future. "I'd like that," I said, "but it will take time. Real effort. Anything," he promised. When we rejoined the others, Diane approached me. "I want you to know I never disliked you, Clara," she said quietly. "Helen convinced me you hated me and that it was better to give you space." "I never disliked you either," I admitted. "I was just a hurt kid." We sat down to eat, and for the first time I shared stories about my life, my promotion, my small freelance business, the half marathon I'd run. They filled me in on their lives, on things I had missed. As the evening wound down, an idea came to me. "Would you all maybe want to come to the community hall with me tomorrow to help serve?" To my astonishment, they all agreed. A month later, my tiny apartment was overflowing. My mom and Diane were laughing together in the kitchen. My dad and Walter from the community hall were debating history by my bookshelf. Chloe and Megan were planning a volunteer event. It was New Year's Day. The month since Christmas had been a whirlwind of healing. My dad had made a significant donation to the community hall and started volunteering there every weekend. Grandma was fully recovered and was teaching me old family recipes. Aunt Helen was still absent. My grandmother held firm. No true apology, no re-entry. I'd started therapy to navigate the sudden shift in my family's landscape. As my therapist said, reconciliation isn't pretending the hurt never happened. It's building a new relationship with full awareness of the past. That night, my dad raised a glass. "To new beginnings," he said, his eyes finding mine across the room, "and to my daughter, Clara, who has shown us all more grace than we deserved." Later, As people were leaving, my phone rang. It was Megan. "We set a wedding date," she squealed, "June 15th. And Clara, I want you to be one of my bridesmaids." Tears pricked my eyes. It was such a simple, normal thing, yet it felt monumental. 6 months ago, I would have been lucky to even know she was engaged. After everyone had gone, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, thinking about the journey from that cold doorstep to this warm, full room. The path ahead wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a very long time, I looked toward the future, not with dread, but with a cautious, fragile hope. I had learned that family could be the people you're born to, and the people you choose, and that sometimes the most painful rejection can be the catalyst for the most profound homecoming. Have you ever had a holiday experience that started out terrible, but led to an unexpected breakthrough? Share your story in the comments. If this journey of forgiveness and rebuilding resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more stories about healing and growth. Thank you for listening, and may you always find your way back to the people and places you belong. End of story.